Heart of a Champion, Chapter 8. One Saturday, Jimmy asked me to go with him and his father to a Giants game. They're playing the Padres, and it's cap night, too. I asked my mother. Let me call Mr. Winter and get a few details, she said. I'd never been to a major league game, and as she talked with Mr. Winter, I was afraid there would be some reason why I couldn't go. But when she hung up, she smiled. Have fun. My mother never drove fast, but on the way to the game, Mr. Winter roared past the other cars on the Bayshore Freeway. I kept expecting a cop to stop us, but none did. When we reached Candlestick, Mr. Winter parked in the first lot. He looked at the signpost, P11. I'm counting on you boys to remember that. We found the right entrance, gave our tickets to the usher. Inside, a little man was passing out Giants caps. I stuck mine on my head. I'll never forget entering a major league park for the first time. The field seemed so big, the chalk so white, the grass so green, and the thousands and thousands of seats, filling with fans buzzing with excitement and tension. Bits of baseball conversation floated by. Radios were tuned to the pregame show. This was the real thing, the big show. Looking down on the field, I dreamed of being out there myself. It was a crazy dream for a guy who hadn't even made the majors in Little League, but I dreamed it anyway. As soon as we were settled, Mr. Winter stood. I'm going to get myself a beer before the game starts. You boys want some hot dogs and Coke? I handed him the money my mother had given me for treats, but he handed it right back to me. In the early innings, I tried to talk to Jimmy, but he barely answered. He was leaning toward his father so he could hear the explanations Mr. Winter gave for almost every play. Jimmy's face was tight and twisted, like he was in a math class and wasn't understanding what the teacher was saying. By the turn of the third, I gave up even trying to talk. The Giants were behind 4-0, and that didn't help my mood either. In the fifth, Mr. Winter got himself another beer and us more hot dogs. The night had turned cold. I was glad my mother had made me bring a jacket. By the bottom of the sixth, the Giants still hadn't scored a run, and some teenagers behind us started booing them. Fair weather fans, Mr. Winter said, looking over his shoulder. They're the worst. In the top of the seventh, the Padres' leadoff hitter smacked a hard grounder down the third baseline. Kevin Mitchell made a nice stop behind the bag, but threw the ball away. Maybe that rattled Davy Dravecki, the Giants' hurler, because on the next pitch he gave up a 2-run homer to Benito Santiago. The hitter after that walked, and the guy after him doubled. By the time the top of the seventh was over, the Padres led 8-0. We stood for the seventh inning stretch. Mr. Winter bought himself another beer. Come on, you can do it, he yelled as the leadoff hitter stepped in. The teenagers behind us laughed. Yeah, you can do it, one of them yelled. You can strike out, you piece of crap. Mr. Winter faced around. Watch your language. As soon as Mr. Winter turned back, the whole bunch razzed him. Ooh, Mr. Tough Guy, they mocked. Mr. Winter pretended not to hear, but he was mad. He didn't clap, not even when the Giants rallied for 4 runs and loaded the bases with 2 down for Will Clark. The whole place was rockin'. Jimmy and I yelled and stomped our feet. The count went full. Everyone was standing. The Padre pitcher wound up, delivered. Clark swung and missed. Around us, people picked up their stuff and headed for the exits. As the Giants took the field in the top of the 8th, the high school kids really ripped into them. And crap was about the nicest word they used. Finally, Mr. Winter couldn't take any more. He wheeled around to say something, but as he did, he knocked his beer onto Jimmy and me. Can't you hold your booze, old man? One of the teenagers called down. Why, you... Mr. Winter started to climb over the seat. I really think he would have gone after them if an usher hadn't come up. The usher talked to the fans around us and then made the teenagers leave. We sat totally silent through the bottom of the 8th. After the third out, Mr. Winter told us to pack up our stuff. I want to beat the traffic. We're at P11, I said, in the parking lot. D11, Mr. Winter snarled. No, it's P11, isn't it, Jimmy? It's P11, Dad. Both of you shut up. I don't know how Jimmy felt, but I was close to tears. My mother never told me to shut up. She just didn't talk that way. By the time we found the car and drove home, it was after 11. My mother made me hot chocolate and had me tell her about the game. I pretended I'd have a great time. I didn't want to bring up the high school kids. but she smelled the beer on my coat, so I had to explain what happened. She didn't say anything or seem angry, though she did make me shower. The next morning at breakfast, she gave me the news. "You're not going to any more games with Mr. Winter." "Why?" I asked. For a long time she wouldn't tell me, but I kept after her. Finally she said she didn't want me in a car with a man who'd been drinking. I told her that Mr. Winter had only had 3 beers, and most of the men at the ballpark drank beer, but she wouldn't back down. The whole thing came up one more time, with Jimmy. "My father wasn't drunk at the game," he said, his green eyes flashing, as we sat off by ourselves sipping Cokes that Saturday. "Who said he was?" I answered. Jimmy stared at me. "They didn't say it, but I know you were thinking it." "I wasn't thinking it." Jimmy looked up. "Good, because he wasn't." He paused, and I could feel the anger go out of him. "My dad feels bad about yelling at you. He won't ever say he's sorry. He'd never do that, but he feels bad. I know he does."